Alright, so this morning we're going to talk about your colored pencil color mixing charts. What I have here is a 12-inch by 10-inch grid. That's because that is what our set is that we have. So we have 12 colors, which includes a white, a black, and 2 different browns. And the goal of this project is, number one, to practice the way that you lay down colored pencil. I'm sure everyone has worked with them before, but not in quite the manner that we are working with here in class. We're trying to kind of up our game with that. So what you'll see is that we're going to do, you're doing the same colors, hues on both axis lines, plus white and black on the 12 set side. Each one of these squares is 1 inch. And on this side, we're going to leave it so that you can see this gray mid-tone of the paper. And we call that tone. That's when we mix a neutral middle gray with any of our hues, with any of our colors. So you'll see that here we can see some of that neutral gray coming through, and that's doing an optical mixing, so that we are not physically mixing like we would in paint to have the gray come through those colors, but because we're letting that seep through from the texture of the paper, we're seeing what that mid-gray is going to look like when it is part of these mixed hues. On this side, you'll see that we'll have a much more solid type of application, and this is going to happen through layering. So we are going to start with each one of our colors here, and then we layer the subsequent one down, and through this central part here, you will see what that actual hue is, and then surrounding it is all those mixed variations. All right, so you can see that I've already started. I've done our red, our orange, and our yellow, and our first green here. And so now I'm going to show you the technique using our dark green here, which is called grass green. What I want you to do is make sure that you are not doing each individual square at a time, and that you leave a kind of halo around each one of these squares. I really want you to do a full length of each hue in its designated area. That's going to help you get a feel for how to apply the color so that you have an even application, and you'll also get a feel for how they are mixing with each other. There's some physical blending that happens, and then some layering that we'll do as well. So I want you to really be careful and think about how much pressure you're putting down each time you're putting that hue down. You want to make sure that it is a nice even coat, that you're not overlapping marks too much. You'll start to see, so on this side where I want it to be that tone, where I want that neutral gray in there, I may change direction slightly so that I can hit that edge, and I might do kind of a swirling action as well, but I'm not pushing down too much. I'm going right to that edge. I want a nice even distribution of my colored pencil. Again, because this is really sharp, I want to make sure that I'm not getting a really dark line. I could press down further and you'll see some of that here, but right now this is really a gentle application. You see how I'm going the whole length of this one, and now that I'm in that neutral gray, you can see the way that that hue is being applied very evenly. You don't see a lot of individual marks. I'm going back and forth, but I'm kind of swirling it as well. If I see an area that's starting to get too dark or is too light, I'll go back over it. Being really careful when I get to that edge line as well, so I don't go into those other quadrants. And doing that whole length that's designated to this color here. Okay, so I do it that way. Then I'm going to come up here. It's the same color on this side. And with this one, I press down just a little bit harder, because here we're going to have more of that solid. I'm going to do it through layering. So you can see already right now these two look very similar, and that's okay, because we're going to layer in here my green, and I'm going to come back in with my red and my orange and my yellow. And we're going to go over that a couple of times to get this kind of density. Layering becomes really important with colored pencil. So if I press down really hard, I can get a really dark mark right away. But because of the wax nature of a colored pencil, once you start pushing that down and into that tooth of the paper, it can be really hard to pull material out if you need to correct, or to layer in because of that wax. It becomes very slick, and you'll reach a point where that area of your drawing is really saturated, that it cannot get any darker. So we'll talk about in other demos how you can use sandpaper, how you can use spray fixative to help that as well. All right, so you can see where our green has come together here, that very different looking than this. What I want you to do is kind of do a little diagonal here, and that's going to designate your tone side versus this side where we're going to that darker end. So here I'm going to do, this already has 2 layers on it. I'm going to do a 3rd layer with a little bit more pressure. And you can see suddenly that value shift. We're seeing less of that gray that's sitting underneath there from our toned paper. So I'm going to go ahead and do that so you can see that difference within the hue itself. Then I'm going to go back over my layers and I'm going to do, so this is our red. I'm going to do another layer of the red. Oops, I went over it, huh? Over top of my green. Do a layer of my orange over top of that green, even though there's one already there. Same thing with my yellow. And then I'll do one more layer of the green over top. You can see some physical blending that occurs. So we got optical and physical that happens. We see how that really becomes very vibrant. And then, whoop, and here's our green. And you see I've changed the direction of my mark here, and that's okay. I'm going right up to the edge. Remember, no halo. Right to the edge of each form. And now I'm going to do one more time over top with my green, this grass green, because I want that to be, once again, that's our dominant hue. And I'm going to really think about evening out that color distribution. I'm going to see what do those colors look like if mixed. And there's different applications we'll use these mixes for. You know, red and green are complements, so often I will want them to make those dark values versus using a black. So we can see this is where we have that physical gray that's still coming through. So we've got that optical mixing that's occurring because of the physical gray of the paper. Here where we're working on those layers, and I could keep layering one on top of the other, and get that density that we wouldn't even see the gray of that paper anymore. And I'm going to keep going and doing that all the way down in all my colors. I next go to my light blue. Same thing, really light application. All the way from top to bottom. Trying to keep that material layered evenly. And this is really to get you to get a feel for how much pressure do you need to put down to get that pigment onto your paper. What happens if you go too far? What happens if it's not enough? And so it's really an exercise in practicing that application before you start into our really long drawings and full objects. Okay. Again, paying attention to the direction of your mark. This is a thin first layer. I'll add more pressure on this one. On my second go around, then I'm going to come down here. I'm doing the same thing from this side. This one I'm going to keep with less pressure. Going all the way to the edge. Remember, no halos. Kind of a back and forth, kind of swirly motion. Some areas it can get hard to see where your grid marks are. So just pay close attention, work a little slower right there, think about where the edge is. We did that grid in 2H or HB pencil. And again, I'm bringing that all the way down to the edge. You're going to work a little slower than I am for this demo. All the way down. Come back through, even that out. Still see a lot of my marks. Even over here in that tone area. Okay. Again, where the hue intersects with itself, I'm going to go in, create that half designation so you can see the hue itself with the tone. I'm adding more pressure so that we have less of that paper showing through. And then once again, we come back through here and we relayer that initial hue. So we've got our red over our blues. It's going to make a purple. So we think about what we know about color mixing and how that happens with layering of colors with colored pencil. Our orange and blue, these are going to make kind of a neutral brownish color because they are a complement pair. So right now, these two look very similar, but once we have that layering, we'll see that with the blue, it's going to get a little bit darker. Yellow and blue are going to make the green. Again, we see that's very similar to the green we have next to it. And that next layer will increase that value. And we'll go ahead and do our light green all the way to the edge. And let me go ahead and do this blue over top. You see that it becomes more purple in nature. And this is that layering. So oftentimes you'll have to go over an area in your drawing a couple times to get that right value, but also that right color. So here you'll see once we put another layer of this blue over top, there's a difference between these two. Still really close, but there is that difference occurring. And I'll do this too, even though I didn't do the green. All right, the last thing within this demo that I want to show you is what that's going to look like with the white and the black. Okay, so we have our layout of colors. We've got this one here. I would continue on with my blue, with my violet, kind of my burnt sienna, burnt umber. That would be those next couple phases. Same thing down here. And then I'm going to do my black and my white. Anytime that we add white to a color, whether that is in colored pencil or in painting, we are tinting it. So anytime you add a white, that is a tint. Anytime you add black, it is a shade. So gray is a tone, white is a tint, black is a shade. So if I take my white over here, we instantly see that value shift that is occurring. Move that one real quick. So this is what that tint looks like. And this is with just one thin layer in each one of these squares. So I will teach you that we go to our white pencil really last because it's hard to fight the chalkiness. Like we talked about when we were doing black and white charcoal, that white becomes really powerful. It is necessary. You know, sometimes the only way that we can get the value that we want is through using the white and blending it out with our pencils. But white can really kind of deaden colors. So I will tell you, if you have an apple and you want to make the light area, that to use yellow first and your white last. Those high highlights, sure, they will be a white eventually, but use that kind of as your last resort because it will really kill and deaden colors right away. Okay? And you'll see that black is just as powerful. It also sometimes is necessary, I'll tell you how to use your other colors, this physical mixing, to make chromatic blacks versus going right to that black pencil with your color to make an achromatic black. But sometimes you need that black. It's the only way that you can get the local value of something. But it can really easily dominate. You see here we barely can see the initial hue that was part of that one. So this is that thin coat, thin layer of that black color pencil. If I come back through, I can bring some of that hue, that color black, and you see that value shift, but that black will really want to dominate. So I want you to leave it so that I can still tell what that initial hue was. By using a couple different layers of the black and then the inherent hue. You see that the black with the yellow becomes pretty green. That happens often in paint as well. And that's because black has a lot of blue in its pigment to make that black. Let's see if we can get some of this yellow green to come back. Not pressing too hard, but hard enough so that each of those hues can stand alone. Getting right up to that edge. Okay, so when you add that tint, that plus white, we should see that really vibrant coloration. When you add that black, we still want to be able to see what that local hue is, what that local color is, but the value is going to be shifted. That's that shade when we add that black. So you're going to do this for your whole set of colored pencils. Again, this is a 12-inch by 10-inch grid, and you're going to work your way down, leaving this whole half to be the tone. This whole half will become more solid. See the example in the PowerPoint to know what that final piece is going to look like. Really about slow layering, thin coats to build up. More pressure here as you go, but it's going to be a coat of red, then the purple, red, purple. You're going to have at least 4 coats probably on this side when you are done.